All right, so going to finish up today, finish up practical circuits today, and then we're going to get into, well, actually, I don't know why it says practical circuits on there. This is operating principles is what it is. And then we're going to cover no, actually this is, he calls it practical. Hey, Bob, practical circuits, but it's, yeah, radio circuits. And then we're going to do operating practices afterwards. Okay. Oh. Here I am trying to switch, and I haven't put my receiver in there yet. Okay, common transmitter and receiver problems, radio frequency interference, and you're going to come upon what's probably the hardest thing. It's easy to find things that will fix the various different problems. The problem is identifying what the problem is. That's where the difficult part comes in. So can be caused by fundamental overload. We're talking about RFI here. Fundamental overload is a strong signal interference beyond the receiver's maximum input. Harmonics, which is multiples of a signal frequency, and this is what I tend to have the most problems with at my house. Spurious emissions, which are unwanted frequency spurs. How you doing, Scott? Okay. Spurious emissions, we just got started. Waited until 5 after to get started, so you haven't missed much. In fact, this is the first slide right here. Spurious emissions are unwanted frequency spurs, and any of these can cause problems with TV, radio, or your computer. And this is a thing, computer is right. Wall warts are going to cause problems usually. So you have to unplug them or turn the power off to them. Any of these can cause problems with TV, radio, or computers. Which of the following can cause radio frequency interference? Delta, all of these are correct. Fundamental overload, harmonics, and spurious emissions. Spurious emissions, the most that you will ever hear that term used is when people talk about Bofang radios. So, yeah, they're... Okay. You all hear the sheriff or? Okay. RFI is affecting radio or affecting nearby radio, TV, or computer equipment. If RFI is affecting nearby radio, TV, or computer equipment, ensure that your equipment is operating properly. Ensure that all feed lines and antenna connectors are installed properly, and verify that your own equipment is not being affected. Okay, so what they're saying here, the operating correctly, operating properly, you probably, if it's doing what it's supposed to do, it's probably operating correctly. Ensure that the feed lines and antennas are installed correctly, okay? The biggest problem is not getting the connectors tight. You want them snug. You don't have to get out tools to do it, but you do want them snug. And verify that your own equipment is not being affected. So if your neighbor comes to you and says, dude, your radio is messing up my TV, the first thing you should do is go check your TV. If it's not messing up your TV, something else is doing his. But you have to go through the whole process. You have to transmit and make sure in all the different bands and make sure. Okay. Let's see. Which of the following actions should you take if a neighbor tells you that your station's transmissions are interfering with their radio or TV reception? Alpha, make sure that your station is functioning properly and that it does not cause interference to your own radio, as I just said. Which one is definitely not the answer? Okay. All right, what should be the first step to resolve non-fiber optic cable TV interference caused by your amateur radio transmission? We didn't cover that, did we? Okay, be sure all TV feed line coaxial connectors are installed properly, and your own radio as well. All right, common transmitter and receiver problems. Fundamental overload is caused by an extremely strong signal on a nearby frequency. Not to be confused with you can also get the harmonics. Okay, so near my house, there's a 50 kilowatt AM transmitter radio station. I think it's WWBC, Wide World of Brevard County or something like that, but it's a Christian radio station. And they only operate in the daytime hours. Once the sun goes down, the FCC doesn't allow them to transmit well, in emergency times they can transmit, but they have to drop power. But normally they're not operating at night. So in the daytime, they would wipe out everything because they were so close and running 50 kilowatts, they would literally wipe out everything across my entire band. I got a little filter to go on there, broadcast band filter, and now the band is open. I can use anything except for where there's a harmonic. Where there's a harmonic, and I think there's one or two places where the harmonic falls in an amateur band, where I'll still see a little pulse and we'll still hear it at that area. But beyond that, that little $20 filter is doing really good. But a strong signal on a nearby frequency could be someone, what they're talking about here is another radio operator that's running 1,500 kilowatts on 1,500 watts on a frequency that's just like 2 or 3 off of your frequency. You're still going to hear that, but right filter will knock it down. What would cause a broadcast AM or FM radio to receive an amateur radio transmission unintentionally? This is a bum question, because AM broadcast stations don't receive. Oh, they're talking about your radio in your house, your AM or FM radio in your house. Okay, so what would cause your broadcast AM, FM radio inside your house to receive an amateur radio transmission unintentionally? The receiver is unable to reject strong signals outside the microphone gain. I would guess that it doesn't have anything to do with microphone gain. Audio amp of the transmitter is overloaded. Deviation of FM transmitter is set too high. We said A. Okay, receiver is unable to reject strong signals. They're made to receive, all the AM, FM stations are pretty well spaced in the spectrum for each area. I don't receive any AM, FM in my Jeep because my antenna is only that long. After breaking it off a couple of times, I said, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. Just get something on there that'll protect the connector in case I ever decide to sell it. How can fundamental overload of a non-amateur radio or TV receiver by an amateur transmitter be reduced or eliminated? Alpha sounds reasonable. Block the amateur signal with a filter at the input of the affected receiver. At the input, yeah. Okay, FM broadcast station interference. Overload of mobile VHF radios located too close to the station. Install a band reject filter, which is... Yeah, that's kind of what I was just talking about a moment ago. Which of the following can reduce overload of a VHF receiver by a nearby commercial FM station? Delta, install a band reject filter. Very good. What if neighbor's equipment interferes with yours? Okay, so the first thing you're going to do in this situation is, before you go pointing the finger, because we don't want to do that and be wrong, before you go pointing the finger, make sure that everything is right with yours. That means make sure that all those connectors are on tight, make sure that you've got filters where they should be. And then you're going to go speak to your neighbor and try to find the source of the interference if you haven't already found it in your own home, and then help them fix the problem. And politely inform them of FCC rules, because a lot of them don't know. A lot of people don't understand that if they've got something going on inside their house and it's interfering outside of their house, they're the ones responsible for having to correct that. But you do want to make sure that everything is right on your end first. So the key there is politely inform them. So, all right, what should you do if something in your neighbor's home is causing harmful interference to your amateur radio station? Delta, that sounds good. Make sure everything is good inside your house. Work with your neighbor to identify the problem and help fix it. And then, of course, politely inform the neighbor that FCC rules prohibit the use of devices that cause interference. And remember, when you say that, you have to make sure that yours never causes interference. Common transmitter and receiver problems: distorted, noisy, or garbled audio on FM. A lot of times on FM, off frequency, so you adjust the tuning to correct that. Could be low batteries, replace or charge the batteries. Bad location, and with FM, location is an issue. RF feedback, check grounding and shielding. If you build your own coaxes, look at those connectors, because sometimes that shielding can break loose if you're not if you don't have a little experience building them up. Over deviation, which means your mic is too close. Now, on FM, I've never had a problem with getting the mic too close. I have had a problem with not getting it close enough. So when you are talking on FM, well, when you're talking on anything, don't be shy. Nobody's looking at you. They're just listening to you, and they're going to be more critical about not hearing you than they are of, the faces that you make while you're talking. So, yeah. Yep. Okay, so yeah, over deviation or under deviation, either one can cause problems. What might be a problem if you receive a report that your audio signal through an FM repeater is distorted or unintelligible? Delta, all of these are right. So undermodulation is definitely not going to cause it to be distorted, but it can cause it to be unintelligible. So if you're holding it too far away from your mouth, they just won't be able to hear it. Another thing about that is that I thought I saw somebody with a radio earlier. With your radios, be sure you know where on the radio, particularly your handhelds, where the mic is. Because there's usually just a tiny hole, 1/16 of an inch maybe, and that's where your mic is. And you have to find that spot and be sure that you're directing your voice toward it. If somebody complains about overdriving it, either just back it off a little bit or turn it so that you're talking across it rather than into it. Okay, what might be a problem? Okay, and everybody said, or did we already? Yeah, there's a delta, right, correct. Okay, what is a symptom of RF feedback in a transmitter or transceiver? What is a symptom of that? Reports of garbled, distorted, or unintelligible voice transmissions. There we go. What can you do if you are told your FM handheld or mobile transceiver is over-deviating? Delta, talk farther away from the microphone. All right, takeaways from this lesson. That one was a little on the short side. RFI, radio frequency interference, fundamental overload, strong signal interference beyond the receiver's maximum input, block the amateur signal with a filter at the input of the affected receiver, input of the affected receiver, harmonics, multiples of signal frequencies, spurious emissions, unwanted frequency spurs or Bofang effect, TV interference. Make sure that your station is functioning properly and that it does not cause interference to your own radio or television when it is tuned to the same channel. To be honest, most people are radio, they're using internet radio anyway. Not many people that I know of listen to AM or FM broadcast radio anymore. Be sure all TV feed line coaxial connectors are installed properly. AM/FM interference. The receiver is unable to reject strong signals outside of the AM or FM band. Better equipment obviously will do that. Transmitter and receiver problems, interference from neighbors. Work with your neighbor to identify the offending device. Politely inform them that FCC rules prohibit the use of devices that cause interference, and make sure your station meets the standards of good amateur practice. Once you identify, if you go to your neighbor and you want to identify what's causing the problem, then once you identify it, make suggestions of how to fix it or just fix it, one or the other. FM broadcast interference, installing a band reject filter, distorted noise or garbled audio on FM means your transmitter is slightly off frequency, your batteries might be low, or you're in a bad location. RF feedback will generally be accompanied by reports of garbled, distorted, or unintelligible voice transmissions. Mobile or handheld over-deviating, talk farther away from the microphone or talk across it rather than into it. Either of those options can help. Any questions before we move on?